I always think about things. My mind's always churning, and I attend events like this. I'm cordial. I'm also losing my voice. I've got a little cold, so just bear with me. But I always am thinking about things. And deals like this, I always applaud when somebody comes up and is introduced, cordially. But isn't that kind of like going to the restaurant and tipping the waiter and the waitress before you hear what they've got to say? You may not even like what I have to say today, right? Henry Ford was that way too. He had a unique thing, and I've used it a little bit myself. And it's interesting to me because he would go to dinner with someone, and he wanted thinkers around him. That's a big thing about me. It's not me. We have 2,700 employees. It's not me. It's that 2,700 people. And anybody that I see some folks here sitting in the front row too that have businesses or they're associated. It's that group of people that make this work. And Henry Ford would sit down, and they'd go to dinner, and his first thing was, did they salt their food or did they test it? Okay? Because somebody that salts their food, they're in the habit, they're in a mode, they do the same thing, maybe over and over, and that's not necessarily bad. Maybe that's just their mindset. But the person that tastes their food first, then determines whether it needs salt and pepper on it. Now you got somebody that's out thinking, questioning things. Okay? That's going to be a common theme that I know I've witnessed all through my life. I've seen it constantly within our business as we brought people on board. And I even see people today as I sit down and I think about it, and I go to lunch with them and I see them do it. And you know what? You can kind of tell who are your open thinkers and who are your people not necessarily locked in a mindset. I'm not saying they aren't good people because they salt their food, but it's just the mindset of what they do and can they think. It's a big part of stuff. That's a big part of stuff. I grew up, I'm a third generation grocer. My grandparents on my mother's side were from the Arkansas area. My grandfather started stores in Oklahoma City, central Oklahoma. My folks, my dad met my mom. They were in Drumright and Cushing. That's towns west of Tulsa there a little way. Some of you may know where they are. And they met, fell in love, got married. My dad got into the Army, Camp Chaffee down here at Fort Smith. That's where I was born in 1954. And I'm 54 years old today. And I say that because 62.8% of statistics are made up. And that was made up too, because my birthday's on the 11th of November. Anyway, you got to remember that, the statistics. You really need to pay attention to stuff like that, because we see a lot of statistics. You all see a lot of statistics in your classes. Now, I don't think most of them are made up, but it's things you read in the papers, things you hear on TV. Think about those things. Once again, I'm back to that thinking thing, right? It's all right to question. It's all right to wonder where some of that stuff comes from. Anyway, my folks were in the Army. My dad played trombone in the band. That was his big claim to fame. In fact, he was actually working at a bar the night I was born. I think he made $8 a week. Thank goodness it was Army and he didn't have to pay for the berth. But anyway, when somebody finally got the word to him, it was after midnight, and he came on down, and we were there a year or two, and then it was my grandfather, like I said, on my mother's side, that got my dad in the grocery business. And this is the late 50s. He was walking door to door selling refrigerators and freezers. That's how he got started. And of course, you can imagine doing that today. Walking through a neighborhood, knocking on the door, trying to talk to some housewife or somebody that's home from work. Would you like to buy a refrigerator or freezer, from me today? Okay, can you imagine that in today's day and age? It just wouldn't happen. But it was those basic underpinnings is what taught him so many things about life and so many things about understanding people and business. And it also was the things that taught him how to sell, because he learned he could gauge and judge people. Okay, because that's a big part of this deal too, is being able to understand people and get a feel back. It isn't. A lot of people say, well, they read body language. Well, if somebody crosses their arms, they're tuning you out. Not necessarily. You need to understand the tone of the voice and all these other things that interplay. I cross my arms because I get uncomfortable. And it feels comfortable for me to cross my arms, but you can see I'm not too worried about being in front of you here today. It's just a comfort thing for me. But anyway, those were the big underpinnings of the things that taught him a lot about how to conduct business. He and my grandfather and a guy named Uncle Hal, who wasn't even my uncle. I don't know why they called him Uncle Hal. I think it was just because the kids couldn't figure out any other thing to call him. They were looking around the state of Oklahoma, and my dad wanted to get into the grocery business there, and so they picked a location in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Now, my dad passed away in 2004. In fact, I was scheduled to speak here, and that's the reason it got canceled, or at least my appearance was canceled, was because of his passing. But he wouldn't want me to tell this story, but since he's gone, sorry, I'm going to do it anyway. They went down and they were going to build a jet fuel plant in Muskogee, Oklahoma. And it was like the F-86 Sabre jet or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. And anyway, they were going to build this rocket fuel plant in Muskogee. So he said, this is a great place. They were building hundreds of stores, hundreds of houses out on the south side of Muskogee in a community called Hilldale, which is the south side of town. And so they went over there and they put together this. There was a shopping center going in. They put the lease together, signed a little lease, and it was about 6,000 square feet. Probably not much, probably twice as big as this room, which was an average sized grocery store then. It's still there today. It was a pawn shop or something the other day when I went by there. So anyway, they signed the lease and they're all excited and they're laying all the plans for this. Next morning, headlines, Muskogee paper, fuel plant ruled obsolete. Okay, shut it totally down. They were building 400 houses out in there in the neighborhood. They literally went out and told the carpenters stop hammering nails, just stop. So anyway, they're scratching their heads and they're trying to figure out what to do. They were already committed to it. Wasn't anything they could do. They opened up the store. My dad worked. He worked every day for about 2.5 years. In there, he was the produce guy. He was the meat guy. He was the whole bit. Had a couple of people to check and do some other things, but that was it. I mean, that's just the way the grocery business was back, and this was 1959. So he stayed there for 2 years, got everybody their money back, except the banker, owed Oral Lamb, I believe was the gentleman's name, who's passed away since as well. Owed him $5,000. So he got my grandfather his money back, my Uncle Hal his money back, and a couple others. I had 3 brothers at that time, so we had 4 kids. My mom and dad had 4 kids, a great-looking 58 silver and blue Chevy station wagon, with the seat flops up and it faces backwards, one of those deals. Loved it. Got car sick, but I liked sitting and looking out the windows. That had also a 3-wheel Cushman scooter, which is what my dad drove back and forth to work. And we had it until, and I'll even talk about it here in Tahlequah as well. So he fought it hard. Like I said, he didn't miss a day in 2 years. He did miss a couple of days because I came home and went to the first grade there, and came home and gave him the mumps. So he did have to hang out on the couch for a couple of days, but fought it for 2 years plus, and then sold the store, closed it actually, and he never did like talking about it. Left town, he laughed because we had a 58 Chevy station wagon. He said that's exactly what we left town with, was $58. And went to buy a store in Broken Arrow that a gentleman had and was getting up in age, and he was wanting to sell. He said, well, they had worked it out. My grandfather was tied in pretty strong with the warehouse, and they knew who had stores and who was maybe wanting to get in or out of the business. So they said, well, this guy's wanting to sell. Once you come up, work for him for a few months, kind of get things going, and then he'll sell you the store. So my dad went up there, and in those days, and about $10,000 a week. It's still a lot of money, but $10,000 a week was about all that store ran. Well, this was the summer of 61, I believe, and it was the summer of 61, so by Christmas, my dad, relying back on his selling refrigerators and frozen freezers there door to door,